The Yu-Gi-Oh community came out in droves last night to discuss the new tournament policy update that went live by Konami. Players from all over the world coalesced together on social media to discuss the new changes in a very positive, healthy and constructive manner. As we all know, the Yu-Gi-Oh community is renowned for its optimism and positivity, which was on display last night to discuss the new tournament policy documents in a very healthy, constructive and great feeling intellectual manner. This game is shit! Good to see even more buffs to cheating. Why do we like Yu-Gi-Oh if Konami hates it? This is garbage, encouraging unsporting conduct. Good job, Konami. This is one of the dumbest ruling decisions I've seen. Ah yes, I'm sure fanboys will defend this as they did the single sleeving rule. Okay, maybe it didn't go down that well with most of the player base. There were a bunch of other subsections that were altered in this tournament policy documents, one of which was the new hygiene section. When someone behind you says, "You smell that at the YCS?" I'm in danger. New hygiene rules. Psy-frame players, let me in. Let me in! Yu-Gi-Oh players trying to figure out a shower handle. Yes, Konami has made it illegal to smell. You can now be penalized for not taking care of yourself. This is not a shower. Konami have also introduced a new tiering system to describe how they will be categorizing their events going forward. Another subsection that was added was the concept of predatory trading, which can now be penalized at an event. For example, and I don't want to call anyone out with this, I'm not targeting anyone, but hypothetically, if I have two secret rare Duelist Alliance Dantes at their peak £50 price during that format, and someone has a Castel tin card, that's a bit of an unbalanced trade. And again, I don't want to call anyone out here, but if I was to go through with that trade, that might be perceived as predatory trading. Jordan Gallagher, Danny Cairns, Yu-Gi-Oh! Free trading on Facebook.com. But like I said, I'm not here to call anyone out or anything, that's just a hypothetical example. And Konami has implemented the concept of taking back and private knowledge as well. I'll be going over each section in today's video, so let's just start off with the most important one, that is the new verification changes. For those of you who are unaware and maybe don't attend tournaments because you're not very good, or you lack the self-conscious to be around other human beings, don't worry, I totally relate. So what this means now is that Konami has changed this and you are no longer allowed to verify and double check whether or not your opponent has a certain card in their hand or whether or not they have legal targets remaining in their deck. And this is where Konami incurred the wrath of the player base. I do highly recommend that you have a look through the blog article yourself and see just exactly what Konami had to say about these things, as well as the amended policy document, and you can have a look and read through that and see just how good it really is. I didn't make a video on the Banlist update that we got last week or so, and again, that was a very positive thing, and they've taken further steps to further communicate with the player base and talk to us and tell us what they're thinking, what their reasoning and logic behind certain things are. So it's really amazing and a positive, great thing to see from Konami. All of these things and everything mentioned in this policy document is genuinely really, really good and a great welcome addition to competitive play. But the verification thing is the one that I guess a lot of people do take a bit of an issue with. So what's my opinion on the new verification issue? Well, it's not as bad as the time rules, I guess. So that's a positive. It'd be kind of hard to top that one, actually. I'm not gonna lie. You know, I'm just looking through my deck casually. After I activate Gear, I realize there's one less card remaining in my deck. I'm sorry, why are you playing Gear? It's just an example, okay? Oh, you couldn't think of a better example? I am perpetually stuck in a mental time warp of 2014. Bring back hat format. Leave me alone. So the biggest hole that we can kind of punch in this new policy document is very kind of blatantly the idea of just simply lying to your opponent saying, nope, didn't have it. End to battle phase, end of battle phase, activate Mind Crush, call evenly matched. It's just a prank, bro, didn't have it, you discard a card. Oh, you didn't have evenly matched despite going into the end of the battle phase? Nope. Oh, do you mind if I check? Nope, you're not allowed. And further than that, I am not allowed to reveal private knowledge to you and show you my hand, so you're not allowed to verify this, and you are not allowed to call a judge in this scenario. You're saying I can't call a judge either to verify whether or not you had evenly matched? Nope, because you are not allowed to call a judge unless you have supportable, being the keyword, supportable, jokingly, evidence that your opponent may be cheating. Activate Mind Crush in the standby phase for some reason. Call Engage. Don't discard an Engage because I'm lying.
Why the fuck you lying?
Activate Upstart Goblin. Activate Engage. Hey, I mind crushed Engage. You should have discarded that. Sorry, bro. Drew it off the upstart. That essentially in a nutshell is what the most abusable thing is with the new verification rule. A very important one as well that people haven't really mentioned, and it's a card that is personally one of my favorite cards of all time and is something that could just be amazingly powerful one day. And that card is Lullaby of Obedience. There was a very famous feature match which took place once upon a time with Kamal Crooks activating Lullaby of Obedience in the Zoom error and declaring Speedroid Terratop. His opponent then proceeded to say, I do not have a Speedroid Terratop in my deck. Despite it being a Zoom error, you'd think that that was very questionable, and they turned out that he had cited it out or just didn't play it for whatever reason. The difference back then is that you're able to check your opponent's deck and see whether or not they actually have a legal target in the deck. With the new tournament policy documents now, you will not be allowed to check whether or not your opponent has something like a Phantasme in their deck, despite maybe even seeing it in the previous game. They could simply claim, nope, cited it out, don't actually have one in my deck. These are probably the two biggest examples I can give of how these rules can be abused. Sounds pretty bad, doesn't it? Getting mind crushed? Just say no. Your opponent legally cannot make you show your hand without your consent. Mind crush. Declare one card name. You discard one random card. Lullaby of Obedience. Pay 2,000 life points. I think to an extent it's kind of justified, but at the same time, if I was to really be honest and think about this, like my friend Ryan said, the advantage that Mind Crush gives you as a player was probably maybe like 86th on my list of priorities for what's wrong with Yu-Gi-Oh! If we could just take a step back and be rational for a moment and stop doomsaying and claiming that the game is unplayable and destroyed, let's just think how relevant this actually is. When was the last time you saw Mind Crush or Lullaby played in a deck? I think there's literally like one top this format with Mind Crush in a side deck. For the most part, you're never going to be blind Mind Crushing anyway. And even then, you're assuming that every single time you use Mind Crush, your opponent is going to be cheating. What I'm about to say might come as a big shock and surprise for some of you, but I can promise you that most players aren't really trying to maliciously cheat. Not everyone is out there to deceive and play dirty. Big if true. In the very rare scenarios this even comes up, I think it's going to be even rarer in that rare scenario that people are going to actually just straight up lie and say they don't have that card. The best example why I kind of warmed up to these new changes was, for example, if I activate Libich of the Burning Abyss as Chainlink 1 and Dante in the graveyard as Chainlink 2 to add back a monster from my grave to my hand, I would be legally allowed to special summon the monster I just added back from the graveyard from my hand with Libich, provided I had an initial target in my hand legally already to begin with. That is something that has been in the game for years. No one has ever needed to justify or reveal to their opponent that they actually have a legal target to begin with. If I Firewall try and attempt to special something from my hand like an ABC piece, after B triggers in the graveyard, or A, I'm not sure which one does which, I'm sorry, I'm not an ABC player. Calvin, please don't be mad at me. You don't need to reveal, hey, I actually did have a legal target to begin with. Therefore, it calls to reason that Mind Crush didn't really necessarily need you to reveal in the first place. Is it really fair that your opponent gets to look through your whole deck, potentially finding some kind of side card that you were keeping for the next game or something that you just didn't draw, and being able to tell maybe what's in your hand because of the remaining cards in your deck? Situations like that arose just because of how abusable the whole reveal and verify mechanic worked. Mind Crush was inadvertently way too powerful than it was originally designed to be because of the whole verification issue. So I understand it is frustrating and it can be a little bit scary that your opponent could literally just lie to you. But the fact of the matter is, if someone is out there to cheat and is determined to cheat at an event, they were probably going to cheat you anyway. These new tournament policy changes don't really change that. Now, at the same time, I do understand on the other hand, there probably shouldn't be tournament policy places and change that try and facilitate and perhaps maybe even encourage this sort of behavior. But for the most part, I think Konami just wanted some consistency with these things because they didn't want people constantly calling judges during an event and asking, hey, my opponent special summoned the Burning Abyss with Libich. Did they have a legal target to begin with? There's a Gozen match on the field. My opponent is chaining a Psychic Cosmo monster to special summon a machine from his hand. Does he have a legal Psychic in his hand to begin with? And there's probably countless more examples of this instance where players would randomly think that they were entitled to a judge being able to verify these things when they just simply weren't. Overall, overall, I think that this is kind of a negative change, but in the grand scheme of things, in the picture of the whole and the context of the whole policy document, I think this was overwhelmingly positive and a good update regardless. Yes, I understand Minecrush has just basically become unplayable now. Not so much because of the fact that your opponent might cheat or not. I think Minecrush just isn't very good anymore because of the fact that you don't get that full knowledge of the hand anymore, which is the power that Minecrush used to previously give. So overall, I think that the verification changes are not that great, but I really don't think that they're the end of the world game-destroying shenanigans that people have claimed that they're going to be. Really, just ask yourself, how relevant is this going to be for you? Are you playing Minecrush? If it bothers you that much, don't play Minecrush. Minecrush isn't going to be the difference between a top or not for you. I promise. Whew, okay, that was a long one. Let's move on to some of the other changes. One other section that Konami has added to their tournament policy documents is the concept of unfair trading, or as they've so eloquently dubbed it, predatory trading. I'm very curious how Konami actually plans to enforce this. I mean, your concept of a fair trade might be an unfair trade in my eyes. I mean, where do we really reach the middle ground? How do you police this? How do you rescind this? Are we going to have to actually do
no trade backs?
Or how is this going to work? Tournament tiers have been updated by Konami, and they have actually given official sort of declarations on what constitutes a tiered event. Tier 1 is going to be sneak peeks in your regular locals. Tier 2 will be VIP qualifiers, LLDs, UDS, that kind of thing. Tier 3 is going to include things like the LLDs final, YCSs, WCQs, and Tier 4 finally is just going to simply be the World Championship. I'm going to have great success in all of these tiers, aren't I, YouTube? And the most funny subsection added by Konami was this hygiene section. Persons who neglect self-care to the point that they are negatively impacting the tournament may be asked to correct the issue in order to continue in the event. Can I just say, Konami, I am a big fan of the wording here. What issue seems to be the problem, duelist? Oh, my opponent smells like a fucking corpse. That's the issue. Yeah, I remember one regional from 2014. I swear to God, with these new changes, if I called a judge on this, my opponent would not only be disqualified, he would have been shipped off to some kind of internment camp for how bad he smelled. This is a great change, and I honestly have no complaints here. If you don't take care of yourself physically before going to an event and you actually smell terrible to the point that you're making me misplay, which has actually happened, my opponent smelled like a walking skid mark dipped in embalming fluid under a graveyard, then yeah, you should be disqualified. Fucking ban your ass. Just shower. It's not hard. Another controversial amendment to the tournament policy documents was committing to plays. Committing to a move includes but is not limited to verbally stating or announcing an action or removing your hand from a card. Basically, what Konami have done here is that they've made takebacks illegal. I think this is a little bit more of a hindrance at the local level, more so than the tournament level, but I think that if you're friends with people at your locals and stuff, sometimes people are pretty lenient when it comes to taking things back and just, you know, letting little minor things slide. So I think this is a little bit tough there, and I don't really know if locals have the right to sort of waiver some policies and let people do takebacks if they so desire. But I think they wanted consistency here, and I think that's a very good thing because simply no one wants to be that guy. Like, shorty, you click. It's too late, you click. I mean, no one wants to be that guy except you're me online on Dueling Book, but that's a different story. I think they just wanted to standardize the kind of awkwardness that people might feel when they say to your opponent, sorry, I can't let you take that back, because now taking back plays is literally cheating. So the important thing to recognize here is they've clarified that if you physically remove your hand from a play, for example, if you were about to overlay and then let go, you probably have committed to an overlay at that point, then that's something I think is pretty fair, and I don't really see an issue with this. During her battle phase, she verbally declares an attack with Monster A while gesturing that Monster B attacks. If Monster A can legally attack, the duelist cannot make a different choice. First of all, Konami, girls don't play Yu-Gi-Oh! And second of all, if I verbally announce an action, that will always take precedence over my physical action. So if I physically poke a card while declaring a different card name doing the attack, what I say will take precedence over the physical declaration. Again, this is not really anything major or particularly that new, but it's great that Konami are clarifying and making sure that players are all on the same page so that we don't get he says, she says stories and like, oh, but I did this, although he said this, and Judge! Just shut up. God, Yu-Gi-Oh! Players are so pedantic. One last final thing to cover is private knowledge. The following information is considered to be private knowledge, and it's basically anything that you are searching or setting. If your opponent asks you, oh, by the way, what did you set with multi-roll? And they ask this like a turn later, you're not allowed to tell them. Again, I think this goes back to the whole no take-back section, and it's sort of to not really create this kind of awkwardness and feeling obliged to tell your opponent something they don't really have the right to know anymore when they should have just known at the time. Like, I don't need to tell you what my set cards are if it's like a turn later, you should have just remembered. A lot of players do want to be able to not be that guy and just be courteous to their opponent and tell them anyway because they feel that that's kind of their right to know this information, which is understandable. But again, is it really the end of the world that you can't tell your opponent what your cards are? Like, just don't tell your opponent what your cards are. Why would you do that? They're helping you. Boys, Konami's helping you. They're literally just saying, don't tell your opponent what your cards are. Why are you mad about this? Again, like I said, overall, everything was a great change, and I don't really have much complaints for most of this stuff. The only big issue, I suppose, that really came out from this was the whole Mind Crush verification thing, which I hope, as I've maybe tried to convince you, really not that bad. Like, they hardly affect anyone, and if it bothers you that much, just don't play the card. I get that it's a matter of principle, but at the same time, I think that having a standardized sort of view of what constitutes verification and not verification in a tournament setting is probably for the best. Thanks everyone for watching today. Make sure you comment, like, and subscribe if you enjoy my content. Give me money on Patreon, buy my cards at YJoCity.com, and follow my Twitch so you can watch me live every single night. All things are in the description, and until next time, namaste.
Keep spending most our lives living